Hello, everybody. I'm John from VETtoCEO and Folla Capital, and I'm here with my what I consider now good friend Lance McClanahan, who just bought a company. So we're going to share his story today. How you doing, Lance?
Doing well, John. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's just cut to the chase. Can you briefly describe the company you bought, and just in however way you want to do that?
Sure. So I just recently purchased Ramar Transportation in Leland, North Carolina. It's been in business since 1988 and pretty niche area of the transportation industry that it deals with arms, ammunition, and explosive transportation. Uh, and it's been holding a pretty steady customer base in that niche for quite some time. So we are regularly moving, uh, explosive and hazardous freight for commercial customers, and also overdimensional and more specialized freight for Department of Defense and other commercial customers as well.
Cool, very cool. So tell me about your military background. What did you do in the military? When did you get out? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I enlisted in 2003, right after high school, and I went through various different jobs. Uh, but I guess the highlight of my career was the enlisted to officer program. Those with any knowledge of that particular transition know it well. It certainly probably was the best thing to happen to me in the military. But I spent 12 years enlisted and another 10 as an officer, and recently retired June 1st of this year. Spent the last uh, probably 5 years, 6 years as an operations officer with the Marine Special Operations Command, and before that, a infantry officer aboard Camp Lejeune, North Carolina.
Very cool, very cool. So as you started to like realize you're going to get out of the Marines, kind of what went through your mind when you were thinking about what you're going to do after you left the military, and specifically what led you down the path of wanting to own your own business?
Yeah, that part, like everybody else that's transitioning out of the military, sent me on a spiral, kind of, an identity crisis, if you will. And I think what really solidified my pursuit of ETA and purchasing this business was I did what a lot of transitioning military folks is went and got an MBA. And while pursuing that MBA, I met up with uh, some people I still hold in my network that help coach me through the initial process and kind of explain what it is. We don't really get taught this in high school, much less the military. So it was a relatively new phenomenon to me. And I kind of latched on to the concept early into the MBA. And then, upon graduation, stayed in contact with those particular individuals who were successful at doing it. And I kind of looked for veteran transition services that focused specifically on ETA and M&A and all the other buzzwords. Uh, and then, it just kind of flowered from there. Everything just made sense to me. Uh, I tossed around the idea that a lot of other MBA graduates pursue the consulting world, the high paying, high tempo jobs that exist for, um, you know, newly minted MBAs. And I just, it didn't jive with what I wanted. It didn't present itself as something that would, give me what I wanted, uh, after, 2 decades in the military. So, uh, the, the, the services that are out there have been tremendous, and I can't champion them enough, but they certainly helped keep me on the hook. I'm sure we'll talk about later. There's a lot of pitfalls in the process, and there's a lot of deterrence in the process that hopefully, um, people that were in my similar position, uh, branch out and find the right mentorship to lead them through that. But I found the right ones, and that kept me on the hook in pursuing this path that I did.
That's great. Related to that, Lance, did you think about, the street paths we talk about, buying a business, franchising, and startups? Did you give franchising or even the thought of a startup any thought?
Yeah, absolutely. I pursued all of them, or at least researched all of them, and I'll go through each one. First, franchising. To me, and I'm sure this it's a very subjective interpretation, but to me, franchising was just uh, working for someone else under a fancy word. I'm sure people will argue that till they're blue in the face, and uh, I'm certain my interpretation is a little skewed, and that's fine. But nevertheless, I kind of landed on uh, the premise that franchising wasn't for me because I didn't dictate the terms. It gives you the power to dictate some things, but not all things, which is what attracted me to the ETA industry. Um, the the concept of startups, uh, I'm still pursuing one right now in the background with my wife and my family, but it certainly wasn't the solution. It is more of a byproduct of my experiences that came from the actual buying an existing business. So, uh, while startups were a great idea, and I'm still pursuing those opportunities, uh, it wasn't. I was not positioned well enough to completely rely on the startup requirements needed to make that thing successful. Uh, so that led me naturally to the buying an existing business. And so obviously I'm here, I'm doing it, and I look forward to the opportunity to kind of share more of those details with others that may find it interesting.
Cool, very cool. Um, so, as you know, but other people might not know, I went through your journey with you buying this business, and I couldn't personally, Lance, I couldn't believe how silky smooth it went. And so along those lines, can you kind of brag about, how easy it was and kind of, two categories, kind of what met your expectations in terms of what you experienced and what didn't meet your expectations, if you can kind of drill down on those two things.
Yeah, one will be a lot shorter than the other, and the things that met my expectations were few and far between, which I think is very conducive to someone that is willing to endure that type of suffering uh, in all aspects of the work. But to answer the question, the things that did meet my expectations were commitment. I think I knew going into it that the time and attention commitment necessary to see something like this into fruition uh, was intense. So I at least was mentally prepared for that aspect. And I think that was the only thing that met an expectation at the beginning. However, the things that didn't meet my expectations were the timelines associated with something like this. Time is probably the most uh, finite resource in life in general, but in this particular endeavor, because everybody associated with an M&A deal has their own timeline and their own processes. So I, coming out of the military, expected something a lot more regimented, a lot more uh, like checklist mentality and rinse, wash, and repeat. But that doesn't exist. And if I could, I hope to stress that to anyone going down this path, that there's just be ready to be flexible, but you have to also be able to manage multiple timelines and kind of drive the bus for everyone. Um, the expectation that you're going to come in there and just kind of have one checklist and everything's going to go perfect, just don't even get involved if that's the expectation or if that's your particular necessity. Um, uh, Yeah. So I think at the beginning, I didn't have an expectation of mentorship because I didn't know the value of it. But as I got throughout the process, that being the very key to success is having a mentor who's been there and done that and hasn't just talked about knowing people who have been there and done that. And that also speaks your language and that also can, you know, wade those uncertain waters with you. So I think that became an expectation that was met and surpassed by my particular mentor, which for those watching was John.
Well, I knew you were going to say that, and that's not why we're doing this thing. But back to you. I told you all along that it takes real leadership to get to the finish line. You probably heard that 100 times, right? So
Once
it,
or
it
twice.
really is a reflection of your own leadership ability that you got to the finish line. But great comment. Anything else that didn't meet your expectations that worth mentioning?
Yeah, I mean, personalities in general. I think, John, we talked about it ad nauseum, and that's transitioning military just inherently trust people and processes because
Mm.
it's shoved down our throats for years and years. And there is no avenue or platform with which to question those processes or even to kind of debate them. Yeah, there is personality management for people who don't even understand kind of where you've come from, nor do they necessarily care because when dealing with sellers and brokers, which I'm sure we'll talk about, uh, it's about money and time. So you have to be sensitive to that fact and be able to speak intelligently and professionally, but keep the train on the tracks. Otherwise, it could derail very quickly.
Yeah, I want to drill down on something you said. Like, can you speak to like the number of people that became involved over time? I watched you from afar, and you got through that pretty well, especially in some acute stages at the end where you kind of had to grab the handlebars of the process. Uh, what's your feedback on the amount of people that kind of exploded along the way that you had to deal with to get the deal done?
Yeah, there's quite a few, and even more come out as you kind of share your journey. But I mean, I guess the first, I'm not even going to call it a hurdle, but the first challenge is dealing with a broker whose sole interest, a seller's broker, is their sole interest is the benefit of, the seller and themselves. Then you have the seller, who, in my particular case, and a lot of other cases that are kind of in the retirement stage of their life, they built something from nothing. They have created this big green machine that is their business, and you are the stranger trying to take it away from them. So the again, back to the personality management, but the emotions tied are were certainly something I wasn't expecting. Then you got attorneys, then you have insurance agents, then you have investors. That's a whole different ballgame. Potential investors, even when, at least in my experience, having seen one or two come across that I shared my journey with, and they were very interested in getting involved from an investor perspective. Uh, they were doing so very much for their own gain, and I think I was not ready for. I wasn't anticipating, or even kind of, nor did I have a background expectation that these investors actually wanted to, you know, see me succeed individually. They saw me as a low hanging fruit. And I would caution anyone bringing on investors to just have that mentor in their corner for when these sharks, for lack of a better term, come out to try to take a large portion of your equity for very little upfront investment.
Yeah, that's my favorite topic. But you forgot our friends, the bankers, too. There were quite a
Oh,
few bankers involved, right, along the way.
Yeah, you're right. I did forget that, and I'm embarrassed to say I did forget that. But yeah, I would say that would uh, that's the first real hurdle for a buyer, and that is like you have to. There's a laundry list of them, and all of them uh, seem to be self promoting of veteran entrepreneurship through acquisition buyers. But when it came down to you know putting their money where their mouth was, they weren't really that. So you have to find the right lender. You have to find the one that will listen to you, actually cares about where you're coming from, the value that you bring to the table, and don't just look at you from a spreadsheet perspective. I had a few lenders that didn't care about where I came from, what I've done, what my plans were for the business. They just cared that uh, I was bringing much larger amounts of equity injection to the deal uh, because of my past 2 decades doing the military. I was too much of a risk to them, despite the fact that they promoted themselves as, veteran friendly and uh, veteran promoting.
Yeah, that's a recent IG report just came out reporting on the percentage of veterans that get SBA loans, and it's woefully low. And we're not going to get into that today, but I think you experienced that firsthand. But one other thing is a lot of folks when they're starting out the journey, as you did, like there's this notion that you have to get pre-approved for financing, right? Can you walk me through how many approvals you had to go through with the bank that you ended up doing the deal with, like over time? Just kind of characterize that a bit.
Sure. That was a very daunting task, and none of it was super clear. So from I think 3 or 4 lenders that I went to before I ended up with the lender I closed the deal with, they were, um, they all had their own internal investigative process. They all had all the stones that they wanted to turn over on me personally. And came down to the fact that, a pre-approval just means nothing. It is absolutely irrelevant in the process. And as I got pre-approval on top of pre-approval or denial, or not approval, it just showed more and more behind the curtain that this subjective process that is different with every lender and every broker, uh, the pre-approval is completely irrelevant. And it might be an initial hard gate for some that are just tire kickers, but those pursuing this in the future need to be very wary of brokers who are demanding pre-approval letters and banks that offer pre-approval letters, because they mean nothing until due diligence. And the broker is only going to give you the bumper sticker version, the headline version of what their business makes, what it's done in the past 10 years or whatever the case. And the banks don't care, like they don't care. They're like, show me what's really behind the curtain. So, yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. If you could rewind the clock like over a year ago, so before you started down the journey that you just finished, and this is more for other people like you that are starting to go down the same road, or leaving the military and they're on the ETA trail. What are like the top like 2 or 3 things you learned that you'd like to share with those folks that you wish you knew before you started?
So I think I've said it a little bit, but the most important thing, the number one thing that someone needs to do is get a mentor. Get someone who who speaks your language. For those that are, veterans transitioning into this process, research people who do this for veterans specifically. And I would do your best to be very hesitant about everyone on, platforms like LinkedIn that self-proclaim to be, answer to this particular solution. Actually dig into them, meet with them, and talk to them. You need that mentor, especially transitioning from the military. There is so much you don't know, And there's so much that could really derail your process, or even worse, uh, a post-closing realization that you, in fact, don't have as much control over your company as you thought you did once you bought it. So that would be my top one thing I wish I knew, um, before we started, was the importance of a mentor. Luckily, I found it very soon in the process, and luckily, um, it landed with you guys. But don't be so, I guess, headstrong and egotistical that you could do this on your own and figure it out by yourself. That is not the case um, in ETA. I guess the second thing would be brokers they're not your partner. Especially like seller brokers are not your partner. They're professionals, and their priority is commission. Don't waste too much time being friends with them, or um, you just need to be effective working together. So create a professional relationship, maintain open communication, but don't think that they have your best interest in heart there. Um, and I think we kind of talked about it a little bit. Then it's kind of the second and third things that I wish I knew, and that's the nuances around lenders and the things I just talked about. Find the ones that's going to bet on you. Find the one that gives that actually cares about you, and not necessarily what's produced on a spreadsheet. Because ultimately, when you close, it's on you. It's completely on you. So find someone who's willing to take that bet on what you've uh, like kind of conjured up, and the research that you put in, the time and the sweat equity that you put into this. And the same goes for an attorney. One key thing that I wish I knew ahead of time is find one that is in your time zone, mainly because to accommodate these frequently changing timelines and the disjointed processes that exist from all the multiple professional players in an acquisition deal, uh, having someone at the same timeline to accommodate, the business you're buying, their business hours, the broker's business hours. It is not a deal killer, but it will slow down a deal, in my opinion.
That's great advice. And I'd just like to hang a little bit extra on all 3 points. In terms of mentors, I would highly recommend anybody listening to this that those mentors have at least two must-have characteristics. One, that they've actually ran a business before, and two, they've actually bought or sold a business before. It doesn't have to be their own, but there's a lot of people running around out there giving advice and never done one of either of those two things. Secondly, brokers, if I can just add some commentary. I know some really good brokers. I know some really bad ones too. And unfortunately, in most states, if you can fog a mirror, you can be a business broker. And, that is what it is. So most of them are good and professional, but a lot of them aren't. And we have to know what we're dealing with there. And in terms of lenders, there's this thing called the SBA SOP, which is based on the regulation that banks have to follow to be an SBA lender. But banks can add to that. So to your point about banks, not every bank's the same. And I'll leave it at that. So while they still have to adhere to the same SOP, their priorities, processes, and underwriting standards vary from dramatically. So good points there, Lance. Appreciate those. Anything to add based on that?
No, you hit it. It's all subjective, and there's no cookie cutter process to pursue here. You're right.
Last question. I think you covered most of the answers possible for this question, but what would you leave for listeners of this in terms of, what's the best advice you can give others? After you've been down the road and you look in the rearview mirror, what's the best advice you can give others that are thinking about it? Anything you haven't mentioned yet?
Yeah, I would say kind of frame your mentality before you even get started. If you've done anything remotely similar to a selection process, there's an adage, don't make a decision going uphill. You need to make this decision before you get started that you're going to see it through, because there's so many opportunities to kind of back out. And there's a lot of things that are going to reveal themselves. That's going to make it very easy for you to change your mind, if you will. And it is so important that you know that going into it. In addition to that same type of mentality, if you have a family, you need to prep your family for this endeavor. It's going to be a lot of late nights. It's going to be a lot of, time away in terms of, the analysis necessary to do this, meeting with all of the people we talked about, and kind of compiling the things that are required to see this thing into fruition. So, have the right mentality, which is different than what I've, seen in the military. You have to be like, it's a risk mentality. You're putting up everything you got. There's in my experience, I'm sure others have seen different experiences, but in my experience, there is no magic wand, if you will, to get something for nothing in the ETA space. So if you're not willing to put it all on the line, if you're not willing to personally guarantee it, which is a term you'll become intimately familiar with, if you're not willing to personally guarantee this, this might not be the right time or even the right post-military thing for you to do. And once again, to emphasize, when those things kind of reveal themselves that could derail you mentally from the process, that mentor is what's going to keep you there. Someone, again, to John's point, who's done it, who's seen it, and who knows the benefits on the other side. So I can't stress the importance of a mentor in that particular kind of caveat to the total conversation, which is the mentality needed to, get this thing across the goal line.
Yeah. Appreciate that. So, one last question for you. As of this recording, you're about a month post close, so you're still like trying to find smooth air, so to speak. So, how's it been since you closed? And can you characterize the fun and the challenges you've had since you closed?
Yeah, and great point, John. And for everybody listening, I could still punt this. I could totally nail at this, and that's the beauty of this particular job for any sort of interested transitioning militaries. It's all on my shoulders, and I love it. I want this more than I've wanted any other professional career in my life. And you have to want it. So my particular situation, it's been very high tempo, mainly learning this business. It's again, a trucking company. I've never driven a truck. I've never scheduled trucks. In the military, I was a user of logistics, so I understood only enough to get me in trouble. But the saving grace after closing was the core staff that I acquired in the process. The core staff here, with over 100 years of collective experience, has welcomed me with open arms, which certainly helped during the due diligence process, that I had the access to talk to them and kind of interview them ahead of the closing. So, in my particular case, everybody doesn't get that opportunity. I stress the importance of pursuing getting access to the staff once you are very far down the due diligence line. So, I've learned a lot. You have to humble yourself, and then rely very heavily on the leadership that you've experienced in the military, the intangible leadership qualities and soft skills that you may just take for granted because you've just adopted them, and that's our way of life for the past 2 decades or however long you served. I've found it tremendously beneficial to be able to exercise those those intangible qualities and soft skills. And I think they're going to make me successful because they're already making the staff successful and they're killing it. So I'm very happy where I am.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that part at the end, because I've actually enjoyed watching you do that. You know, I preach about that all the time, but guys like you're like a poster child for a successful military ETA guy, because you've had that leadership experience, and you can see it. It kind of glows in the dark when you're walking around, and you know, you probably don't even realize it, but maybe you're starting to realize it does make a big difference. And you know, that's a huge resource a veteran brings to the table in ETA. Look, I'm just got a few closing comments, and I'll turn it over to you for any last comments. A little selfless plug here. VETtoCEO offers a few programs. One of them is an ETA program called Pass and Guide On, where we kind of share what the process is at 100,000 feet and some resources. We also have a business accelerator program that's 8 weeks long. That is just like a mini MBA program for veterans. And we also have a new AI tool called VETtoCEO on Demand on our website at VETtoCEO.org. If any of you you folks out there want to start dipping your toe in the water around some of this stuff. But more importantly, Lance, thanks so much for making the time today to share your story and pass on some things you learned to fellow veterans. It's invaluable, as you probably know yourself, hearing from people that have actually done it, some tips and tricks, and they're realistic. So I want to thank you for taking the time today. So I'll turn it over to you to close out. Any final comments?
No, John, thanks so much for having me. Like John, I would love to help anybody out there. Please look me up. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find my company, ramartrans.com, and be happy to give you any, individualized advice that I can and kind of help get you to the goal line like John got me there. I will say, as a parting shot, just like there's no check in the box expectation for this process, if you decide, again, at the bottom of the hill that you're going to do this and that you're going to make this happen, make something happen before you expect people to help you. You need to get some traction somewhere, because at least the 1 month that I've been doing this, there's 100 people who this is interesting to. And we do have companies to run. So show us that you're interested, show us that you want this, and that this is the path that you're going to pursue, so that we can kind of help provide rudder steers rather than, pulling you to where you want to go, if that makes sense. But other than that, John, I appreciate the opportunity to speak here.
Great advice, Lance. Great advice. So thank you so much again, and we'll have a great day.
Yeah.